Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. We're going to go through a couple of slides. I'm going to start off, President Dan Coretta is going to go through some timeline things. And then Jeff Lawrence is going to run through the entire golf course master plan. We're definitely going to do question and answers at the end, so if you could hold your questions for them, it will expedite things immensely. So we can always go back to anything. Yes?
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. Mr. Drew.
So, you've obviously read the note about the master plan presentation. If you're like me, you immediately began to think, okay, I wonder which of the, what's going to be the priorities, which projects are we going to do, how much is it going to cost the club, how much might it cost me, etc. I know you all read closely the communication we sent out that basically said we will not be answering those questions tonight. So just want to state that up front. But what I do want to do is lay out the timeline as to what the process we're going to go through to answer those questions and the associated time with that. So let me get over here. To flash back to about a year ago, the board approved funding to hire a golf architect to build a master plan, which I think was a prudent decision. And in the second quarter, we hired Jeff Lawrence, as all of you know. Jeff really, through probably 4 to 5 months, spent a lot of time here, actually probably met with many of you, golfed with many of you, really played the course from all tee boxes, etc., to really get a good handle on the course and sort of to develop his vision. The golf master plan was developed, delivered, I guess about six weeks ago to the board, and tonight is the presentation of that master plan. So that's where we are now. Here's the timeline and the next steps. And what I'm going to talk about is the process that we're going to go through to prioritize, etc. And the thing that John and the board and myself are all in total agreement on is we want this process to be totally transparent, frequent communication, and for anyone that wants to be engaged and involved in the process, opportunities to do that. So in the first quarter, the plan is to hold focus groups with members to solicit feedback on the master plan, recommendations, and development of priorities. So there'll be, for anybody interested, I'm thinking maybe 10-person sort of focus group size to hear input on what people like about the master plan, what priorities, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, etc., to get that feedback. Simultaneously, we're going to be conducting similar focus groups to solicit feedback on the other major projects in the long-range plan. That includes the racket facility, expanded dining, parking lot, and the pool. There are some big projects sitting in the long-range plan that we want to do the similar work on to get member input to come up with what members want from the club. That will be completed hopefully by the end of the first quarter or so. And then the board would get those recommendations, priority recommendations, and make decisions on which projects we want to pursue in each of those areas. And then that would move us into the detailed design phase. So that's when we say, hey, no kidding, this is what we need to get done. Let's go figure out the cost. Some cases, what will the cost be in 2 years? Because that's when we would get to that project. And develop the business cases and the cost around those. I'd expect mid-year on the golf master plan, we'll have Jeff back to give the detailed design presentation. So that would be, here's what I've heard you want to do, here's what the cost is associated with that, timelines, etc. Then simultaneously, alternatives would be developed for financing the board-approved projects. So we're going to have to look at what we want to do, how are we going to be able to pay for it. Culminating in a member presentation for approval of the projects and the financing plan, I'd say somewhere in the September-October timeframe. And then obviously, if approved, scope of work would begin, project implementation, etc. A lot of us get at times questions of, hey, are we going to get hit with an assessment? The most important, I think, piece to that, or beginning to that response is that will be for members to decide. The board has no authority to do an assessment. The board has no authority to do a project over $250,000. What the board will be doing, excuse me, is doing the legwork, the recommendations, coming to membership for approval. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a sense for sort of the time frame to expect, and certainly will entertain questions at the end. Jen, not now. And let me turn it over to our main event here, Jeff Lawrence.
I'm going to try not to use the mic. Can everybody hear me?
Good for you. Don't hide behind the podium.
First of all, thank you for being here. I know it's a busy time of year for everyone, and your participation is important in this process. And really tonight's goal is to go over the master plan in concept. We're not going to go over every golf hole. We're going to go over my findings, my recommendations, proposed timelines, so you get a real feel for what the general 30,000 foot level master plan looks like. So I don't know if you've had time to look at the individual plans that were produced up on the board, and there's plans over here to look at as well. So there aren't going to be a lot of graphics in the presentation. It's more kind of going through the processes, what's been done, the reasoning behind it, and then obviously we can have Q&A at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I don't know how many of you, I've met a lot of you, some of you I haven't met, but just give you a little brief overview of my experience. I've been a golf course architect for 37 years. I've been fortunate to have worked with 3 very iconic golf course architects through my 30-year experience with them, Jack Nicklaus, Tom Fazio, and Gary Player. I've gone out on my own, and since COVID, which COVID's been good for golf, so it was good timing. I take a creative and practical approach. I try to keep everybody involved in the process. It's not me dictating to you. This is your club. This is why I've played with members. I've had discussion groups, and really trying to gather all the information I can from the experience of the members, and then taking that and putting it into a master plan and my thoughts and my recommendations. Personalized service, I only live an hour and a half away. I live in Greenville, South Carolina, so I do take a very hands-on approach. When this project goes to construction, you'll see a lot of me. I've spent a lot of time on site already, playing golf, touring this golf course, etc. And the next phase, the detailed design phase, and then construction, even more and more time I'll be spending on site. And that kind of goes into my commitment is a long-term commitment to the club. So I think that's important to keep consistency throughout any capital improvements to the golf course. These are just, I know that font is a little small, I apologize, but that's a lot of, a sampling of my renovation and master plan experience, anywhere from the region here to the West Coast. I've also done a lot of international work, mostly when I was with Gary Player. So quite a bit of experience in golf course design, specifically renovation and master plans. So the objectives of tonight is, once again, is to review the master plan and give you my recommendations and why my recommendations, based off the information that I've gathered over the last several months. Provide, clarity and insight. Share the project scope and phasing, timeline alternatives, give you an idea what, based off the scope of work, what that timeline might look like. We are not going to talk dollars and cents tonight, that's very clear. And then at the end we'll do Q&A. So really the mission statement from day one was to provide a comprehensive review of the golf course, all 18 holes, practice range, and provide the River Hills with meaningful and important and long-term goals to improve the golf experience for the next generation. It's been a long time since the golf course has gone under a major renovation. That is my mission statement, and which I had shared with the committees prior. So the master plan process timeline, this is going to be a little bit redundant, but I thought it was important for everybody to understand this. So I started in spring of 2024 of starting to make site visits to gather the information and data of the golf course. I started having roundtable discussions with multiple groups, multiple playing levels, men, women. I didn't have any juniors. There were some seniors involved. So that kind of went into the spring and summer of 2024, and playing, like I said, playing with members, engaging members. As Dan said, I played with a group of ladies, and I played from their tees. I hit 5-iron off their tee to kind of know where their landing area was, and to understand how did they play the golf course. Played with single-digit handicappers. How did they play from the black tee, from the blue tee? It's important to kind of digest all that information so that you can provide, so that I can provide meaningful recommendations. So we're here in the winter, presenting it to the membership, and then the final decision of the club on work to be completed, which would be a decision by committee, by membership, what the scope would be for detailed design. And so I think tonight will give you a pretty broad understanding of my recommendations to the club and why those recommendations are given. So deliverables to date, I've provided 8.5 by 11 master plan document, which I believe was sent out to the membership. Is that correct? So I hope that everybody has read this, because there's some good nuggets in here that we'll be discussing tonight. I also provided 11 by 17 individual sheets per hole. So every hole has a defined written narrative of recommendations of existing and proposed. So all 18 holes are presented on this document. And then there's some larger sheets, basically a lot of the same, but in a bigger format that could be presented and hung up on walls, etc., however that wants to be shared. So once again, the graphic plans, the large sheets, the 11 by 17, the scorecard, there's some timeline schedules included in those documents, all to be digested by the club to review and, you know, ask questions at the appropriate time. So the general analysis of the golf course. When I first saw the golf course, I toured it, I played it. The golf course has good bones. You don't need to blow up the golf course. It's a good tested golf, good variety of golf, but you can tell it needs some TLC. And there are many more opportunities out there to create something very special. And it's important to understand that you don't need to do major changes to the golf course. We're not changing any golf holes. The only hole that we're going to probably redesign would be 18 green complex to make it more dynamic, more interesting, use the water, etc. You know, Aaron and his team have it in good condition, very good condition, excellent condition considering some of the challenges they have, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. And it's a fun and enjoyable test of golf. I did find some holes a little narrow for my game. Keep an extra ball in your pocket. But you know, narrow holes, wide holes, uphill, downhill, dog leg left, dog leg right. It's a good variety, a good test of golf. I think the yardages are fair. So once again, it's just refining all what this course has to offer and just enhancing it and improving it. I think the challenge is, for the most part, is aging infrastructure. I know you've just redone your irrigation system, except for the greens loops, but there are key features on the golf course, a la your greens, a la your bunkers, some cart paths, drainage, some additional selective clearing that probably needs to be done just to enhance the golf experience. When talking with a lot of members and playing the golf course, bunkers kept coming up time and time again. So, you know, I played out of the bunkers, I saw the bunkers, you know, every time I toured the golf course, and I would tend to agree. I say they're unsustainable bunkers. The way they're built, they're hard to get in, they're hard to get out, they're hard to maintain, they're hard to keep sand up on the faces, etc. My opinion, they were built incorrectly, and that's why you have the situation you have. Unsustainable bunkers because there's no amount of manpower or equipment from Aaron's team that can keep those bunkers probably the way you want. And that's consistency, playability, maintainability. So, limited driving range, I don't have to tell you that. And I think there's some things that we can help to enhance it. But you're just landlocked. You can't really do a whole lot. Missed opportunities. There are an abundance of opportunities out there that can make this golf experience substantially better. And I'll go through some of these a little bit later, but you know, that's bunker placement, that's greens, that's tees, that's trying to move some cart paths so they don't become so much in play and visual distractions. I haven't experienced firsthand, but I understand there's a big HOA influence. I'm not going to go into that because I don't know enough to really talk too much detail, but I think that will have an impact when you go to construction as far as bringing materials in, clearing trees if we need to clear trees, or do anything along property boundaries. Challenges, once again, you know, residential visual impacts, roads, power lines, rooftops, buildings, etc. You can't do anything about that. You might be able to plant a little bit here and a little bit there to soften and buffer, but it is what it is, and we just have to make the best of it. And then abundance of trees. There's plenty of trees on the golf course. sometimes there's too many. I think the hurricane probably helped us, is trees cast shade, and shade is not grass's friend. So we have to really do a diligent effort in selective clearing along golf holes to create more sun, to create better consistent turf conditions. So recommended improvements. Okay, this is where we get into the nuts and bolts, the big nuggets. So if you read in the document, there's a whole section on greens construction and I typically don't do it in a master plan, but we took cores of all 18 greens and we took pictures of it. And I think you can see from the pictures the profile, the subsurface structure is extremely compromised. And that's just not coming from me, that's coming from expert labs, USGA consultants, Aaron and his team. So it's a combination of all these facts that are basically saying your greens are past their useful life. You have substandard subsurface structure that really is the reason for some of your challenges on the turf level. Your grass is only as good as your subsurface. Your greens are almost 50 years old. 50 years old. And the lifespan of a typical green is 15 to 30 years. So I would say you've gotten a lot out of your greens, but right now it's the most important part of your golf course. And you're living on the edge right now. I probably shouldn't say this, but Aaron has done a wonderful job. Every green right now is a microclimate. Every green acts differently because of the subsurface drainage and lack of air and porosity and infiltration rate. All of these technical things that create healthy, consistent turf. And I think you'll find in that document that the ISTRIC test shows, and the recommendations from experts, that it is time to renovate your greens. Your greens right now, we took a couple samples. A normal USGA green, vertical percolation is anywhere from 16 to 20 inches. The green sample that we took, I think it was hole 13, perked at 1 inch an hour. So you don't have any vertical drainage. You have a black layer sitting underneath your greens. That's why we had to add the hydro wick and to try to kind of give a gap stop cure and give us some time to understand what do we have and what are the solutions to the issue. So I really encourage you to read that document and to look at the pictures, read what the experts have said. I think there's additional documentation that Aaron has from USGA that can support all this information. With that being said, I don't think your greens need to be redesigned. Your greens are good. I think the shapes are good, the elevations are good, the slopes are a little fast in some spots. You just need to rebuild the core structure of your greens. That means drainage, which they don't have, USGA greens mix, which they don't have, proper slopes, etc. And that's, the design of the greens are good. And I wouldn't touch those except for some slight areas where we would soften some contours to maximize pin locations. There are some greens that get a little bit fast, which I putted off one green. What was that number? Was that 8? And Aaron was laughing at me. That's okay.
Should have been there before.
Yeah.
Would redesign bunkers to a new style. I probably would not change a lot of greenside bunkers. Maybe some will get smaller, some would get bigger, repositioned, reshaped. A lot of the fairway bunkers, I believe you only have 7 fairway bunkers. You don't have that many fairway bunkers. But the ones that are in play, I would re-angle to create more strategy, have an opportunity for a more creative fairway line working around it, and just more visual. If you're gonna spend the money on bunkers and maintaining bunkers every day, they need to be visual bunkers. And right now, a lot of the bunkers are basically holes in the ground. Hard getting in, hard getting out, hard to maintain. That would change in this new style. Let's see. So what that would include would be a new design, but it would be new drainage, new bunker liner. What bunker liner, better Billy right now? What's capillary? So it would be probably capillary, better Billies, some of the state-of-the-art bunker liners, new bunker sand. The old bunker sand would be repurposed to cap the tees, so we would reuse that bunker or that bunker sand if we went to a tee renovation at the same time. Going into the tee renovation, I think there's a great opportunity right now to expand the tees. Typically, tees get smaller over time. Tees need to expand to create more time for divot recovery. There's opportunities out there to make longer tees, to connect tees, so that they're easier to maintain. It's a quick pass with the triplex up and back. It gives you more variety with yardage. Variations, especially on par threes, where your par threes are all very similar yardages and you're hitting similar clubs. I think that will give you more variance in club selection and yardage by doing a tee renovation. And that would include stripping the tee, leveling the tee, 1% subgrade pitch away from the walk-on, leveling that off with a sand cap, and then resodding. So you would have level tees, bigger tees, and we would make the red tees, the very forward tees, a formal tee, not a semi-afterthought that they are now. Green surrounds. As I said, I think your greens are, the putting surfaces are solid. I think you're missing an opportunity with your green surrounds. If you think about a lot of your green surrounds, there's really not much happening. There's no definition, there's no collection areas, there's, it just kind of it's just there. And by creating more collection areas and edges, I think you'll create more definition, more strategy, more visual interest. So I'm suggesting that you touch the surrounds of the greens while you're touching the bunkers and you're touching the putting surface and the green.
Jeff,
So
can you give us an example of what you're kind of, I can't picture it.
So hole number one. The green would basically stay the same, the bunker would be redesigned, and then the left edge and behind, you kind of have something going on there, but that would be a more defined swale collection area that would be cut in fairway. So the left edge of that whole green would be more defined because you come off the green, you go into a more defined cut, swale, if you will, that would collect water, and we would set up better pin positions along there. Right now, it's just, we would hopefully clear a couple of the big oaks on the left, if they would allow us, because the turf conditions on that left are pretty poor. So it's really more defining your putting surface and creating more interest, but also creating more strategy. And once we get into the detailed design, that will be identified in greater detail. But in concept, that's what I would recommend. So, you know, that's a big decision for the club to make. So we talked about it a little bit. Is, you know, why these improvements? Basically, reconstruct greens. Like we said, it's your infrastructure. Your greens are outdated. Not they're substandard because of the cultural practices, because of the age of the greens. They're just they're just past their useful life. There's a chart, I think it's in the 8.5 by 11. There's a chart in this document that outlines the useful life of all the all the golf course elements, greens, tees, bunkers, piping, bunker sand, etc. I would suggest to look at this. It does say greens, and this has all been accredited by all the leading industry, USGA, PGA, National Golf Foundation, Builders Association, architects. So it's a very accredited document to look at some ranges of what the useful lifespan is of all the elements on the golf course. So I suggest to take a look at that when you can. Rebuild design bunkers, once again, they're too steep. Safety, people getting in and out of bunkers, safety for the maintenance crew getting in and out. They're not sustainable bunkers. And then we would redesign those and reposition those, resize those, redesign them to make them more visually appealing, maintenance friendly, and strategically relevant. So, tee renovation, once again, tees get smaller over time. We're just going to try to make them bigger. Some of the tees are misaligned, they're uneven. Let's get those level. And then once again, as I said before, I kind of jumped ahead, is formalize the red markers to have them a permanent spot wherever that happens to be. It's be a level lively, a small tee, but at least it'll be a formal tee. It won't be a set of markers out in the middle of the fairway. So this is the document that I mentioned. I don't know if you can read. Greens, typical years, lifespan is 15 to 30 years. Bunker sands 5 to 7. Irrigation 10 to 30. Tees 5 to 10. I would guarantee you all your elements right now are way past those. So that's not coming from Jeff Lawrence, that's coming from all these industry leaders right here saying this is a guideline of what typically the useful lifespan of these elements are based off materials, installation, construction, quality, etc. So then you get into, what is priority? So we talked about greens, we talked about bunkers, we talked about tees. One of the other things in the master plan is drainage, selective clearing, cart path relocation. There's 7 golf holes. If you look at the plans, there's 7 golf holes where I've suggested to relocate cart path. Once again, to get it more out of play, to create a wider width of turf. So it's really what does the club, what's the biggest bang for the club? If they had X amount in a bucket of money, what is the biggest bang for the buck? And how do we prioritize that? In my opinion, the best way to tackle it, and this is what I've done on my last 3 or 4 projects, and it's a big commitment from the membership, is to do as much as you can in the first phase. Whatever that first phase is, do as much as you possibly can. If you phase it, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, based off resources, then it's more time away from the club, more inconveniences for the membership. It's more costly because of the contractor has to mobilize, demobilize, mobilize, demobilize. So my recommendation to you, whatever phase 1 is, try to get as much of that into phase 1 as possible. So hypothetically, if you did phase 1 right now is green renovation, bunker renovation, tee renovation, and green surround. Let's say you did all that. That makes a lot of sense because there's synergies between the two. We can repurpose bunker sand to cap the tees. if we're gonna touch green side bunkers and greens, we should touch the green surrounds at the same time. So there's some synergies to try to do as much as you can while the contractor's on site. So hypothetically, phase one, construction would likely be somewhere between November and June, 8 months. You typically start in the off season, because what you try to do is you try to hit the grassing window. The grassing window is obviously May to September, May to August, and you work back from that date. So a lot of renovations, 8 months of construction, 3 months of grow-in. So basically your course is closed for 11 months. And you open September 1. That's a hypothetical possibility if you did something to that scale. Obviously, the scope of work dictates the duration of construction and downtime. So if you say, oh, let's do 9 holes at a time, clubs definitely do that. But that's 2 years of inconvenience to the members, not 1 year. Because now you're closing 9 holes down, you have 9 holes open, okay, but then the following year, you're doing the same thing instead of biting the bullet all at one time. So the last 2 projects, the one we're gonna get started on here in January and one that's gonna start next year, membership, they made the commitment to close down for 11 months. And just, it's tough, but I think if the club can swallow it financially and the inconvenience and have reciprocity to other courses, I think that's the recommendation that I would give to you. So you could include some cart path adjustments in phase one. Once again, it becomes a financial decision, but ongoing would be remedial drainage. You could do that in-house. Obviously selective clearing and just improving your turf conditions. We have a lot of different types of grasses in the fairways. That's just a cultural practice that Aaron can work on every year just to improve turf conditions. Clearing of trees, less shade, better turf quality. Pretty simple equation.
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Which comes first? The tree removal, or you do the greens, you need the tree removal.
Right, correct. So if this project wouldn't start till 2027, you would have probably a selective tree clearing program up to that point. And start taking those trees out, the ones that you know are gonna cause a problem. That way you get ahead of the curve. So the next steps, once again, prioritize what's most important to the club. I think I think it's pretty clear what my recommendation is. So really define the scope of work. Then once that's defined by the club, then I can start on detailed design and really getting into the nuts and bolts of whether it's green renovation, bunker renovation, tees, etc., and really start honing in on the detail of whatever this club selects to do in the detailed design. Those documents would allow you to take the project to bid. I would help the club choose pre-qualified golf course contractors, the bidding process, award the bid, work on the contract, the AAI contract with the club. And then if there's permitting, obviously we would want to try to get that sooner than later. A couple projects that I've been involved with, permitting has taken longer than expected. Go figure. But it's part of the process. So the sooner that we can get the detailed design plans done, get that into kind of a planning process, that way we don't have any hiccups along the way. Award the bid based off price, based off the team, based off quality work of the contractor, and then commence work, much like Dan's schedule showed, be about a year to do phase one, what it was recommended up on the screen. So we'll leave that open to questions.
I got one question here. I've been a member for almost 4 years now, and this is gonna be the second time course is down. How are we confident that this is the solution to the greens? That seems to be the biggest problem with Southern
Well,
I'm not doubting it.
no, that's fine, that's
Yeah.
fine. I'm going off what the experts are telling. I mean, it's, if you look at the pictures, if you look at the ISTRIC test, if you look at the USGA, and you look at Aaron trying to manage this on an everyday basis, and you look at my experience, they're all saying the same thing. So, it's, your green, it's easy for me to say, your greens are 50 years old.
So
50 years old.
Pick a question. So they're 50 years old, but they were renovated in 2012. They were renovated in 2020. Maybe not to the standards that you're suggesting, right? But there's life in those greens that we just invested in. How much life do you think we have in those greens before we lose them?
I don't have a crystal ball.
Okay, but there is life there because we have invested in them, right? So we need to.
Well, just
did
because you
factor that
invested
in?
money doesn't mean there's life.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah,
So,
it sounds like we band-aided it,
so
right?
it's,
Topped them, we
I-
didn't fix them.
Yeah.
We put lipstick on a pig, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We put lipstick on a pig.
Perfect.
You're buying time.
Yeah.
I don't, if you look this past summer, I think you had a weather event, and the greens went this way. And the reason for that is they don't have any infiltration. Water doesn't go this way. So what happens in the subsurface? Water stands, it's anaerobic, it causes disease, you lose grass. I mean,
No, the pictures were clear. I mean, I just
Yeah,
don't understand.
it's-
I mean, I'm
it-
looking at what you're saying.
And the decision made to do the hydro wick was the right decision, because what you're trying to do is, let's get the best product we can until we know exactly what we're gonna do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have greens. So, you know, I don't grow grass for a living, but I've seen enough in my 37 years of experience that, you know, if you want to set yourself up for success for the next generation, for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years, you need to do this.
Can you maybe talk about what that would entail and maybe the differences of what we've done in years past that I've been referring to?
My understanding, in the past, you've done a grass conversion. So basically, you had bent, you stripped off the bent, you replace it with some sand, and then you replant it with a hybrid Bermuda, Champion Bermuda. Right now, your greens don't have any drainage. It's not USGA spec. I mean, are there greens out there that aren't USGA? Yes, but they probably have drainage. And the long-term cultural practices that were and were not done over the lifespan of the greens. From my experience, there are times where cultural practices were sacrificed for whatever reason. And you just can't, and now you're seeing the repercussions of that.
So, to segue on that, but my question is more for Dan and the board. And I've been through the process over the last couple of years since I've been here. Have we addressed the consistency of decision-making through a 3 or 4 year process with the change of boards every year, with the change of greens committees every year? I mean, are we going to commit to something and then every year it's going to change?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and, you know, we do have a 3 to 5 year plan that, quite frankly, I think we need to really, what I try to lay out there, and why it's inclusive of other things besides golf, because we have other critical areas that we have to deal with. To put that all together and, you know, culminating in sort of a member decision around that with a commitment of, and quite frankly, we need to build in the safeguards of because much of this work will be over multiple years.
Right.
So there have to be safeguards built in around how are you guaranteeing this money is going to those things? And B, you know, that there's not gonna be a switch to another priority or whatever.
Or another president or another Greens committee decides, okay, this is what was decided 2 years ago, but we're gonna change it and go in this direction.
Right.
Kind of where I was going too, because I don't want another Jeff coming here 2 years from now saying, no, we just need to hide it again, or we need to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the difference here is getting at the root cause of the issue, which as Jeff described, 50-year-old greens with significant problems. I think your question's a really good one though, around member fatigue. You know, we've had a closure in 22 for 6 months. We obviously were closed bar and banquet for 4 months. Quite frankly, that's why none of this in 24 was even discussed, because we need several years of just members enjoying the club. And, you know, to Doug's point, I think, you know, this, as Jeff said, there's no crystal ball. For all we know, hopefully not, it could be a serious problem with the greens next year or the following year. But, you know, we also can make decisions around the timing of this to, in my mind, bring in the member fatigue issue of, you know, can we just have a darn year or two where everything's open, everything's great, and then solve the problem. And that's part of, so I think a key part of this first quarter is hearing from members, getting sort of answers, what the general feel is around all that.
I think part of this plan should be that Kim Kerner must remain Greens Committee Chairman for the next 5 years.
I second that. Clean that brown ring off around your neck. Going back to your second slide, sir, the first time a shovel hits the dirt then is the first quarter of 2027? Did I read that correctly?
That would be one scenario. Those are timeframes yet to be determined. There's no way, in my mind, there would be anything done on the golf course prior to that time frame.
Okay, because the scope of work was pretty much the bulk of 26, and so, right, then the first quarter of 27, now we have a defined goal, and here we go.
Yes, may not have shown that correctly on the slide. To give a
First quarter of 2027?
yeah, I think there's 2 reasons why, and Jeff might be able to add a third and a fourth, as to why it would be 27. One of them, in my mind, is the member fatigue that we talked about. Second, quite frankly, is accumulating the funds to pay for the work.
I'm all for it. I mean, tomorrow would be horrible,
So,
2027.
Yeah, in my mind, it's probably gonna come up to a 27 or 28 kind of decision. It's not certainly not 25,
Right.
and not a 26. We're, John Sheedy, Kim and I visited Jeff, right, the ones you referenced, right, when your customer's ready to begin work, right, Holly Tree.
Yeah.
And we went with Jeff and visited them. They're about 2 years ahead of us in the process. So Jeff delivered their master plan in 23. So, and we also want to visit a few others that are sort of doing this work. And we went for several reasons. One was we wanted to hear, hey, communication, you know, what work? You know, we want this to be so transparent, so open to members. Would, you know, walk us through the communication process. We learned a lot around that. Secondly, their time frame, you know, they got the master plan in 23, and their work was scheduled to begin in 26. So it was actually over a 3-year. I think they've moved it up to 25 now.
Correct.
But it originally was 26. So that's the kind of time frame that we're talking about there. The other thing I was very interested, they they did do an assessment, and I wanted to learn about that, and I said, you know, help me, what kind of attrition did you experience after the approval? And I was kind of floored when the GM said, well, actually, we're up 5%. Membership is up 5% since the approval. I said, okay, that doesn't make sense, help me. He said, well, we lost some, but we've added, as people seeing the vision of what we're doing, we've added way more members than we lost, so we're actually up 5%. So that was encouraging.
While I have the floor, can I ask you one, Jeff? I'm sorry. You mentioned bunkers becoming more visual. What does that mean?
Well, a lot of the bunkers right now, mostly the fairway bunkers, there are some greenside bunkers where the way they're built, they're just holes.
The fairway bunker.
Well, mostly the fairway bunkers. Some greenside bunkers, and they're deep. So once you go down, you go back up, and then in order to see the face of the bunker, you got to go really high. So let's say you're standing in the fairway, in the landing area, to a greenside bunker, you're only seeing an eyebrow of the sand, versus seeing almost the floor of the bunker and the whole face.
Okay.
So that the more visual, more in your face. I mean, lack of a better term, that it's not going to be Augusta style, but you know how those are like bam,
Right.
and your bunkers right now are.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
my opinion. I just
You're still gonna hit it in there.
A 78-degree wedge, I get it.
The bunkers were originally designed more that you could see it. What happened in the process that we screwed up is we went in there and lowered them, in some cases 3 feet. But they were actually designed so you could most of them look in. I just gotta make one comment about, as it relates to Ben's question. You can't get over the fact that the large part of the reason we are where we are, after redoing the greens for the 3rd time, is that we stopped certain agronomy practices, whether it be for understanding, lack of money, lack of time. A large reason why we are where we are is we stopped doing things that made us successful before. We stopped doing the drill and fill. We stopped doing verticutting on a regular basis, either because we didn't have the time or we didn't have the money. That was the standard answer and everything. So there's gotta be some absolute managerial commitment and understanding if we do all this. There has to be a roadmap for what you have to do going forward, whether it's not having Monday outings, whether it's fewer shotguns, whether it's the money to do what has to be done. The commitment has to be made for that, because we can't have another 15 years. Well, we can't mow the rough because we don't have money for rough mowing. We can't do the bunkers because we don't have money for sand. So we gotta stop doing that and make the commitment that once we do this, we're gonna fund whatever has to be done to keep it in condition 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
Do you provide that plan?
Right.
Do you provide that plan as well with this master plan?
That's a
Will it
managerial-
be this-
that a lot. I think a lot of what he's talking about is those are club decisions. From an agronomic standpoint and cultural practices,
What needs to be done?
I don't do that.
Okay.
But there are plenty of consultants to do that. I mean, that's a specialized, get Aaron involved, et cetera. But if you need an organized plan and you don't deviate from this, and that's set into the bylaws.
That's where I was going, Dan.
And that's set into the bylaws, or however your
Consistency.
mandates in the club, you don't deviate from that. Because from my data collection over the, several months is, like you said, it's a combination of a lot of things, and some of it is, what you didn't do, several years ago, now it's, you're paying the piper, as I said.
Yeah, and that's a great point, that we need to, certainly making any significant investment, we better be sure we have the right practices. I mean, at least for this year, that was one of the main reasons, one of the big reasons for the dues increase last year, was to right-size the agronomy budget. We compared to other places, Aaron and team have woefully short budget compared to comparable clubs. Secondly, equipment-wise, You know, we've just recently purchased and/or leased a lot of equipment, but we need to go through that in total because it's not going to do any good to not follow the right practices, you know, thereafter. But,
Two sort of questions. One, would this be a country club member vote? And two, looking at the demographics here, I think my daughter might be one of the youngest people. I love seeing the kids out there, but we need to get those people involved in this process.
yeah, on the first, it's absolutely a member vote around any project above 250,000, which obviously everything we're talking about is well above that. And secondly, any assessment to pay for it. Both require member vote. The board will do the legwork, hopefully with a ton of input from everybody to get a sense for what members want so that we have a recommendation that has a chance of approval. And then members, you know, will decide. And secondly, yeah, we want to try to involve as many people as possible to get input around.
Because they're gonna enjoy it a hell of a lot more years than I have.
Yeah, that's that next generation comment.
This is gonna cost more
Well,
I think Frank, you were.
I think just to build on Mike's point earlier, and Jeff, you've done a great job. I think this is fantastic and probably way overdone to the point where we should have been doing this 2-3 years ago. Hindsight always being 20/20, here we are. At the end of the day, this is our roadmap. We have, as a board, it has representing the membership here, we cannot deviate from this plan, period. You can't have another distractions, we can't have anything. Whatever we end up doing has to fit in here. It has to be part of this master plan, because that's where all of our resources, where we're committing to is going to. And, you know, there's been a lot of time and effort being put into this, and that's really the commitment that we have to have.
Should there be another consultant for post-development maintenance? You know, for whatever plan we come up with, I have all of them. I mean, whatever's happened the last year, 2 years, the course looks amazing. I'm not saying anything about that. But if we make this commitment for Jeff's plan, Jeff's not into the ongoing maintenance of it all. Is there someone, are we confident that we can maintain what we spend the money?
There are people available to do that, yes.
That's part of the plan.
Is that something we
And I
need to
think
do,
that would be-
Tom? I mean,
I think that would have to be a decision ultimately of Greens and Grounds and the board to say, okay, do we need that resource? Or are we confident with the resources that we have? I mean, personally, I've been here 8 years. So I saw it when, what brought me to River Hills was the golf course. I figured I could find a house, but I didn't know if I could find a golf course. So I found the golf course first. I saw the progression, went down, and the last year with what Aaron has done with his team, and most importantly, I think, Dan, you alluded to, with the resources that he had, I gotta tell you, I personally, again, this is just me speaking, but Aaron has 100% of my vote.
I agree.
Without a question of doubt.
No doubt.
The only other thing I did want to say, and I hate to keep taking the floor here, is the HOA, right? So, as I asked before, chicken and the egg, we gotta have trees be able to come down. From what I understand, trees are a real touchy subject with the HOA.
That's not good.
So,
We took down over 30 trees in our house, and don't just say it's a no-go,
Good luck
let's
with that.
bring the plan to the HOA and get the HOA to tell us why we can't take them down.
yeah, and we have to have,
Take that
I guess,
anything on
from
that
your
you want.
perspective, from a design perspective, let's say we, for whatever reason, we can't, you have designated trees that you either need to have removed, would like to have removed, whatever, however you prioritize them. What if we can't? Then do we have to go back to a redesign? Do we have to do something different? Or is it something we just live with if we can't take down 3 trees that needed to come down no matter what?
I know a guy.
He works at night.
Let me mention, I've been here for 25 years, I was board president twice. We had a period of time where we had absolutely no problem with the HOA, none, zero. Their attitude was, don't come tell us how to pave roads, and we won't tell you how to run your golf course. That was the condition that existed. We have legally, we have the rights, we have the covenants to legally cut trees within 30 feet of the property boundary if we have to, if a tree's hanging over. What's happened over the years is we've acquiesced and allowed the HOA to have more power than actually exists on paper. I gotta believe if we have an architect, a professional involved, and we go to the HOA and present, this is our plan to make the golf course better, as Frank said, there is a hell of a lot of people that move here because of the golf course, not because of the trees. They move here because, there's the seating, the seating value of it. But if you have 5 trees, having 7 trees in 100 feet doesn't make it any prettier. It just makes those trees less healthy. So there's gotta be a way we can present a plan to the HOA and get approval and not go through this nonsense that we cut one down and plant another one.
Question on.
They don't do
Frank,
it.
let me
Part of
clear
the
up on
problem
that.
is
Some of this trees
reside
on
their
That's one thing that comes up.
Do what?
The trees reside on the people's property that need to come down.
Their own private property, not on our property.
If
Frank,
they're
you said
within-
something I
check
wanna
the
pick up
covenants.
on, though.
If they're within a certain feet of the property, of the boundary, we have the right to go in there and at least go in and discuss it with them.
And those discussions happen. Have
Okay.
happened.
All right?
So, Frank, you said we need to commit to this master plan and don't deviate. So, but my question is, over the next 6 months, the feedback process, that we're gonna go through the focus groups and so on, is that process to give feedback and maybe the master plan gets adjusted based on that feedback? Or is that just a feedback that says what's the prioritization and the master plan is set in stone now?
It's not,
You don't have it.
I think it's predominantly the latter, which is, like, when I, look at this, I quickly categorize things into ooh, that sounds like a must-have, ooh, that, or a must-do, this sounds like a should-do, this sounds like a would be nice to do. I think we need to get consensus sort of around that.
Around the prioritization.
Exactly, I don't want,
Maybe some tweaks to it.
yeah,
But-
sure.
but
I think-
See,
But
Doug,
if that's the next.
Doug, you get 300 or 400 members and everybody wants, well, I don't want that bend on 4 and I don't want that.
Well, I'm just
You
asking
can't
what,
do that.
I'm just asking, is the master plan as it's presented 100% set in stone or not? It sounds like there's maybe a little bit of opportunity to tweak it based on feedback, but the feedback over the next 6 months is more about prioritization.
It's about prioritization, it's about scope of work and potential costs associated with that. I mean, I don't have a sense, I know there are members of this club that golf, the course is so, it's clearly our most important asset. There are people who very much would be happy to invest if it was gonna be delivered a much significant product. There are others, the course is kinda okay. So, don't know, we need to get a sense for that because, we could do this much or we could do this much and there's costs, associated with.
The prior boards have, and this goes somewhat to what Hendo was talking about, have had a priority. So we're gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And the next board came in and that all changed.
Right.
There are other opportunities that are very obvious. Outdoor dining, having some, that's reasonable. The parking lot, which is a pain because it generates no revenue, but it does need to happen. How's the decisions about the priorities?
And that's why I've listed this, simultaneously be conducting member focus groups, this list of feedback on the other major project part of the long-range plan, including brackets, parking lot, dining banquet area expansion. Those, you know, we have two courses of action here, right? One is solely focus on the golf master plan, do all that work, go to membership in, you know, September, October, with, here's the plan, we need your approval. The other approach, and the one and I think the board and John feel is the right one, is to bring together the whole package of significant projects that have been hovering out there, knowing they need to be done, and have been, you know, necessarily in some cases kicked a little bit down the road, right? I mean, sooner or later, we have to deal with the parking lot.
How's that decision get made?
I'm sorry, which?
How does those decisions get made?
It'll be the same, the board will, you know, get the input, say, hey, here's the bundle of work that the board is proposing to be done over the next 5 years, and here's the time frame. That would include the rack facility, parking lot, golf master plan, et cetera. And members would vote on approval of that, and, you know, any potential financing that needed to be approved associated with that. So it'd be done in the same time frame. What I envision is a September, October comprehensive package to membership for approval that would say, here's over the next 5 years, the major projects.
But again, to Mike's point, somehow that needs to remain consistent as the board turns over.
Well, and I think that gets back to that sort of guarantees around, hey, normally we approve a project, it might be for the next 6 months and we spend the money. We're talking about things that might be spent in 3 years. How are we going to safeguard that the money that's either being financed or assessed or whatever it is going to, you know, these projects and only these projects?
It's not necessarily the money, it's that the priorities change as a different board comes on.
Yeah.
Once you make a durable decision on this, we make a commitment to get this done. It withstands the next 4 votes through 2029. And if we have to do an affidavit that anybody's on the ballot has to make a commitment to not undermine it, that's what we'll do.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, because
You were a
the board,
money guy,
the
not a
board will,
lawyer.
the board will change. But at the end of the day, this is again, a commitment for the club, a roadmap really for success for not just the golf course, but the rest of our club that we own and that we operate. And, again, there can't be any distractions or deviations, and if it's something we have to put in,
Then let's do it.
and that's what we do.
Jen?
I really love the fact that we have a master plan for the golf course. I love it. This is awesome, especially since I'm not like really understanding everything you're saying, but I get it.
Okay.
I would love to see something similar for these other parts of the country club that we were talking about, because I think what they're saying is with the different projects, it's a different project that comes up or down. But if we have a country club master plan that has the golf master plan and the racquetball, the racket master plan and the pool master plan and the parking and all the infrastructure and all the everything kind of all together, and here's where we are, and then we vote and say, okay, this is the long plan. This is what we're voting on right now, and it's gonna cost this amount, and this is what we're ready for approval. This is phase 1A, B, and C. Is that kind of what you're envisioning?
That is a vision. Now, to be honest, I don't know if, do we have to hire a Jeff equivalent for the other areas? Or can we somehow accomplish that sort of either internally or, but yes, the intent would be, here's the master plan for the racket facility. For those of you that aren't that close to that, I mean, we've, you know, we sort of the lipstick on the pig thing. You know, pickleball's exploded. We have a very active community membership in pickleball. We have serious underlying, very similar to greens, but underlying the court problems. And the cost associated with that was because the demand for pickleball suppliers was off the chart. So we had to do the patching and fixing to buy us a couple of years. We're gonna have the same problem there within 2 years. So, yeah, we need to have the vision for that. And likewise, to Steve's point, for expanded dining, outdoor dining. Saw some neat outdoor dining at Holly Tree that is very nice. Yes.
We need a pickleball.
Yes.
I would think that having a master plan that's being discussed, not only on golf, but in other aspects of the club, would actually be helpful in recruiting new members. That when someone comes in, if it's explained to them, oh, we have plans, we're actively involved in plans to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that creates a sense of, I'm not walking into a static club that's gonna deteriorate.
That's a great point, and that resonates with me for the Holly Tree example, right? Of, what was your attrition? We've grown since the announcement because everybody saw sort of the vision.
Let me jump on that real quick. At Holly Tree, just as an example, the GM was anticipating a 20% reduction in membership because of, people don't like to be closed for a year, etc. As Dan said, the totally opposite happened. They only lost a few members, but they gained more members because they saw the value of they're improving their asset. And I'm just talking golf. I'm not talking other things, but I think you make a good point is there are a lot of courses in the Charlotte area. It's a very competitive golf market that have done, under construction, or planning to renovate. And if you don't stay up with the Joneses, you're gonna get passed up. I know that's a bad metaphor, but it is. And so if you're gonna attract more members and you're gonna feed the pipeline to the next generation, you need to improve your infrastructure, not just golf, but probably outside dining and pool and racquetball, pickleball.
Lowell, I think.
Jeff, as you know, there's nothing worse than saying that we're gonna improve those bunkers, but yet we don't have definition of that. We need that. We need it in terms of deliverables, such as no more hand raking. We'll use the automatic equipment that we already have. That's a parameter. If it's not, if you don't facilitate the definition of those deliverables in those areas, there's gonna be a whole lot of people thinking that there's going to get something that doesn't develop. And after we've spent a lot of money, and this has happened before, we spent a lot of money and we didn't get what we thought.
Right.
So that's really a critical, important attribute, I think, that you need to make sure that you make us do, I guess is what I'm saying.
And it's a process. Right now, we're at the master plan process. It's a big visionary, the bunkers need to be redone, period. So if that is chosen by the club to do a bunker renovation, then we get into detailed design, and you will have detail, you will have pictures, you'll have storyboards, etc. That this is your style, and this is what you'll get. And it's my job to execute that, and I'm not gonna switch and bait you and say, that's what you're gonna get, but then do something else. That's not good for my brand, that's not good for the club, etc. So,
All I'm saying is define the deliverables in such a way that we all can understand and agree.
I agree.
And that's,
I
you
agree.
gotta put all these requirements in the RFP. That's the detailed design result. Yeah, Jeff will be back with the
Jeff,
detailed
are you
design
producing these
results.
plans, or are you getting a civil engineer, like, if we hire you, are you producing these plans? Are you a consultant to a civil engineer?
No, it's my company.
It's your company.
Yeah,
You're doing
I'm
everything.
producing the plans.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Anything else? Thank you for your
Jeff, thank you for what
Thank
you've
you,
done.
Jeff.
Thanks to Kim and to Aaron. I mean,
Thanks to Aaron as well.
Great job.
Appreciate your offer. I got kids.
What school? What school? Where do you get the kids?